episode of the Stay Juicy podcast is sponsored by Tula MD Supplements. Our mission is to empower women to navigate the menopause transition and beyond with confidence and vitality. Our superior supplements are formulated with integrity and crafted using the finest raw ingredients. We are committed to delivering third-party tested, evidence-based supplements of superior quality, designed to support hormone balance, blood sugar regulation, adrenal health, and sustained energy. Tula MD Supplements provides women with science-backed tools to thrive during midlife and beyond. Hey family, it's Dr. Ariana here, and welcome to another episode of the Stay Juicy podcast. I am your host, Dr. Ariana, and today we're going to be talking about something that's actually near and dear, I guess. Wasn't really so dear initially, but now it has become an area of focus for me. I am definitely discussing it with all patients and screening every single woman that comes into my practice. So what are we talking about today? We're going to be talking about the thyroid. The thyroid is really one of the most significant glands that functions in your body. It is responsible for your metabolism. It is responsible for so much of how you feel, your mood, your energy levels, your body temperature, your hair, the quality of your skin is all impacted by the thyroid. And let me tell you why I am so passionate about the thyroid and why I believe you should know about this thyroid. And please share this podcast with your friends, because I am certain beyond a shadow of a doubt that the information that you get here is going to help somebody. I had to kind of suffer through and figure it out, but I'm going to wrap it all up in a nice little package for you so you can understand this and know how to walk into your provider's office empowered and ready to really understand what's going on. So as I went through the perimenopause transition, not only was I going through that, but I also was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune condition that affects your thyroid. Now, mind you, I had been having symptoms of low thyroid. When I tell you I was a poster child, we're talking hair loss, dry skin, brittle nails, constipation, no energy, the inability to lose weight no matter how much caloric restriction and working out I did, and not to mention my mood, which was quite low. Now, the unfortunate thing, and this is what we're going to be dealing with today, is this intersection between the thyroid and perimenopause, because unfortunately, a lot of those symptoms are how you might just feel during perimenopause. And so how do we tease out, is this my thyroid? Is this my hormones? What's going on here? Now, typically we would say, we would like to look at your hormones, but oftentimes the symptoms of perimenopause, hot flashes, night sweats, I don't really need to know exactly where your estrogen levels is if you're having some symptoms. At the end of the day, we're going to treat those symptoms, and we don't try to make the lab work fit into a certain box per se. That is not the case with the thyroid. With the thyroid, I do want to check labs. I want to check them frequently, and I want to make sure that whatever treatment that we decide going forward is either helping, or at least we know how we need to adjust things going forward. Now, I went to medical school, obviously, did my residency. First of all, as a gynecologist, we learned about, the thyroid in probably by the, our physiology classes, but there really just wasn't any really strong education around the thyroid at all. And that's really sad, because it's such an important gland that affects us so much. But that said, I didn't know a lot about thyroid except what I learned in school, which was, you have a low thyroid, hypothyroidism, and you feel a certain kind of way. You're going to take a medication. It's going to help your thyroid. And then there's the opposite of that. You can have hyperthyroidism, where your thyroid is overacting, overproducing hormone, and you take another medication that's going to typically make the thyroid decrease the output of thyroid hormone. With that said, I think that the average doctor, gets the basic, and we are looking at some pretty basic lab. This is what they taught us in school. You're going to look at TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, and you're going to look at T4, maybe. But TSH is actually the screening hormone that most doctors are going to use to look at your thyroid. And the key here, this is the key. This is the one. If you don't get anything out of this podcast, I want you to know this part. First of all, let me back up and say TSH, it's produced in the brain. in the anterior pituitary portion of our brain. And what happens is the thyroid, which is a gland located here, right in this neck area, it's a little butterfly shaped gland, small but mighty. But the thyroid itself is going to release thyroid hormone. And that thyroid hormone is going to circulate in the blood, and the brain is going to perceive how much thyroid circulation is happening here. It's the same like with estrogen. TSH is for the thyroid. FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, works the same way for your ovaries. So we use these as screening tests to figure out how well the organ that we are looking at is functioning. So in the thyroid's case, if the thyroid is low functioning, meaning you don't have a lot of thyroid hormone, then the brain's like, hey, where's the thyroid here? I don't see it. I need more thyroid stimulating hormone. It makes thyroid stimulating hormone that talks to the thyroid, and the thyroid says, oh, okay, I got you. I'll make some more. In response to that, it's going to make T4. That is the precursor hormone that ultimately has to break down into T3. Now, I know I'm getting into the weeds here, but you need to get this weed part. What happens is when you go to the doctor, they're going to look at your TSH, and in conventional medicine, if it's not 3.5, 4, 4.5, they're like, hey, everything is good here. Never mind you're tired, can't lose weight, fatigue, whatever. It's just your thyroid's fine. I know there are countless people out there listening and have had this experience. They've gone to the doctor and they've researched something and they're like, hey, I think it could be my thyroid. They check their thyroid labs. They come back. They say, oh, nope, everything is fine. Let me tell you, it's very possible that everything's not fine. The reason why is because in conventional medicine, we look at TSH primarily. And if that looks okay, we're like, really don't even look at the other hormones and what they're doing and their levels. Not only are we using TSH as the main way to screen for the thyroid, we're also using a range that's really, really high. For some people, their ideal thyroid TSH level should probably be somewhere closer to 2 or 1 as opposed to 3. And so we're looking at a bell curve. When you're all the way up to a TSH of 4 and 5, like 90%, 99% of people are going to, first of all, have a lower TSH than you. But at the end of the day, yes, you're on the curve, but that's not normal. So conventional medicine kind of lets us work all the way out to the ends of the margin here. And it's like, well, your labs are normal, you're good. Well, that's obviously not the best way to look at this because everybody's different. Every body is different. And we're all going to respond differently to our levels of circulating thyroid hormone. But getting back to my experience, I was going to the doctor and like, hey, my TSH, it did look kind of normal. I was confused. And I didn't even know that I should be looking at the thyroid hormones themselves. And frankly, they look pretty normal. I didn't know. So I just, I was like, well, I have every symptom. I honestly felt like you could take a picture of me and put it next to the word hypothyroid, and that would be the end of that. I finally went and really was evaluated by somebody who practices what we call functional medicine. And this is really why I ultimately changed my whole approach to medicine and did the integrative medicine program and really started practicing functional medicine, which really gets to the root cause of the problem. They're not there to give you a Tylenol for your headache. They're there to figure out, why do you have a headache and how is that related to your gut and your sleep and everything else. So functional medicine really is, in my opinion, the way that we should be all practicing, looking at the root cause of the disease, not treating the end result of how we're feeling. Like, you're not going to give me just some vitamins because they don't have energy, or give me some medication to grow my hair back because my hair's not growing. Like, why is your hair not growing? Why don't you have energy? These are the questions that a functional medicine doctor will ask, as opposed to oftentimes our conventional colleagues that just really want to treat the symptom. Fast forward, I suffered, and I was literally going through the throes of perimenopause and hypothyroidism, and it got to be really, really messy. And finally, I found someone who taught me and helped me understand how my thyroid was actually functioning. Not only did they do that, they actually screened me for Hashimoto's, which is the most common autoimmune condition that's going to affect the thyroid. And what that means as an autoimmune condition is that your body makes antibodies, right? Like, think of it as an infection. If something comes into your body is going to try to figure out a way to kind of circle around it and encapsulate it and keep it from being able to spread to the rest of your body. So these antibodies are meant to protect us, but women in particular are more prone to having autoimmune conditions, which means we make autoantibodies. We make antibodies that actually attack our cells, attack our body. So in Hashimoto's, you make antibodies that actually look at the thyroid and think of it like it's an infection or something that doesn't belong there. And so that is going to also decrease the functioning of the thyroid. So I went to this practitioner. My TSH was basically in a relatively normal range, but when you dug deeper and you looked at my T4 and in particular, my free T3, which is the most important hormone you can look at in your thyroid, period, hands down, in the conversation. My free T3 was literally 2.0, which even by conventional standards was at the bottom of the range. So my TSH looked normal, even though that's a screening test. My T3, which is the most important lab that's going to help me understand and really indicate how my thyroid is functioning, was in the toilet. And how do you reconcile that? Well, I was ultimately treated with free T3 just by itself. And when I tell you it changed my life, it changed my life. Thyroid is also going to affect your memory. And you talk about brain fog. So again, these symptoms all overlap with perimenopause. Trust me, I had the perimenopause brain fog. I had the hypothyroidism brain fog. And I was a hot mess. Actually, I was a hot, cold mess because I was freezing all the time. I would literally be in the building and have to wear scarves. And I'd just be like, it's so cold in here. Like, why is everybody walking around here like it's not 20 degrees in here? I was freezing all the time. These are all symptoms. I had them all, like I said. Anyway, I ultimately was treated, changed my life. And from that moment on, I was just like, wow, this is crazy. And from that day, I started screening every single woman that came through the practice for Hashimoto's and looking at the thyroid from a different way. And this is really the main takeaway from this podcast. If you don't listen to the rest of it, you just need to hear this part. When you're evaluating the thyroid, you want to look, yes, at the TSH. But mind you, a lot of places now, you can just draw your own labs. You can do this on your own and figure it out and at least have something to start with when you go to your provider. You're going to draw a TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. You're going to look at a free T3 and a free T4. Those are pretty much the main ones. Now, if you want to get really dig into the woods, there's a reverse T3, and we also want to look at the antibodies, which are thyroid peroxidase antibodies and thyroglobulin antibodies. Those are the two most common antibodies that are going to affect the thyroid. About 80% of people are going to have positive TPO, what we call thyroid peroxidase antibodies. And then there's a subset of people that have Hashimoto's, which me too. I didn't have TPO antibodies. The most common antibodies that affect your thyroid, I had thyroglobulin antibodies. So you need to check for both, especially if you're suspicious that you have an autoimmune condition, which I think every woman should be screened for. As I screen women, I would say at least 5% of the women I screen coming through this practice are positive for Hashimoto's, meaning they have positive antibodies. Now, that doesn't all mean that they all need to be treated and it's an issue. And we're going to probably have to do a whole nother episode on Hashimoto's. You want to look at those antibodies because that's going to really inform, again, kind of what the etiology, what's the cause, like why is your thyroid doing this? And we can get into a whole conversation about autoimmunity, especially in women, because autoimmunity at the end of the day is exacerbated by stress. And it's just a fascinating idea, a concept when you think about that your body is just really kind of betraying you. It's like looking at you like, I don't know who you are. And it's attacking certain things. So rheumatoid arthritis is going to be in joints. Type 1 diabetes is going to be the islet cells of the pancreas. And Hashimoto's, it's going to be the thyroid. So lab-wise, you can do this on your own. Now, the reason why T3 is so important, and this is where your doctor may be getting it wrong. Hear this part. T4 has to convert into T3. T3 is the only active hormone that's coming out of the thyroid. So this is the thing, the conventional doctors, they're going to look at TSH and T. Those can look normal, but your T3 can literally still be in the toilet. Yes, it's very possible. And I don't really understand why even endocrinologists, trained endocrinologists, like they don't even seem to really understand how the thyroid functions. And I'm sorry, I don't want to bash here, but I mean, it's just, I don't understand it. At the end of the day, it's a known fact that T3 is the functioning hormone that our body can use. It's the only thing our cells can absorb. But nobody looks at the hormone itself. They use the TSH as a screening tool. Now, I don't know if this is true. I heard this at a lecture, so I'm going to pass it on. I haven't researched it myself to know if it's true gossip, but what I heard that when Big Pharma kind of got involved in treating the thyroid, they basically created this algorithm of how we screen the thyroid. And they kind of dictated how this was done, went into our offices and was like, this is how you do this. And look, we have a drug here that's going to treat it. If the TSH is here, you're going to use this drug, levothyroxine, Synthroid. That is T4. Now, I'm not saying that T4 is not a great drug, but what we need is T3. And you can have all the T4 you can have, but if you don't convert that T4 into T3, it just really doesn't matter. And that is where functional medicine, naturopaths, and conventional medicine, we completely diverge, because we are looking at how well are you converting your T4 to your T3. There are lots of reasons why you may not convert your T4 to T3 very well. Stress, infection, autoimmune conditions. Not to mention, in order for your thyroid to function well, your thyroid has to be supported by other minerals and vitamins, in particularly iron, vitamin D, vitamin E, like pretty much all of them, but vitamin D and iron, iodine, selenium, super important for thyroid function. And we're going to get into the supplements and what you can do to support your thyroid, even if you don't necessarily meet the criteria for any of this, but you want to do some things to just support your thyroid function, which I think is always a good thing. So the divergence of conventional and functional medicine is really in where we look at these labs and what we consider acceptable numbers and ranges. So for a functional medicine doctor, they're going to look at a TSH. If your TSH is over 2, not 3.5 and 4 and 5, if it's over 2, we're going to start asking questions, because we don't just want you to be in normal range. We want you to be optimal. What is optimal? Like at the end of the day, we're talking about energy. We're talking about metabolism. We're talking about your brain function. We want optimal. So optimal is going to be under 2. And so once it's over 2, we're asking questions. What's happening here? And again, there are plenty of people walking around that have TSHs over 2 that feel just fine and nothing's going on. But there are people that really need to have a TSH range that's much lower, and that's really where they're going to feel better. So we're using like this universal standard for people and how their bodies should be, kind of performing based on a lab that's applied to everyone. I've had patients walking around with a 3.5 TSH and a 4, and I'm like, really, how you feeling? I feel great. Everything's fine. Okay, great. Next topic. But I have people that just barely have a TSH of 2, and they are just literally dragging. And when I say dragging, let me tell you how tired I was. I was so tired. I remember I was working in Baltimore. I was still working in high-risk pregnancy. And in my office, I didn't even have a bed. I brought like a little blanket to lay on the floor. I would close my door and I would have to close my eyes just to make it through the day. Like I felt like I was dragging. I mean, it was terrible. I keep digressing, but I feel like it's important to tell my story, because when I have patients come to the office, invariably, I've been to so many doctors and they say my thyroid's fine. So I know it's not my thyroid. I'm like, okay, well, we'll see. Let me check your thyroid. And more often than not, it's suboptimal. And then we're going to do some things to support the thyroid. But just know, if you are feeling super, super tired, if you are feeling like you cannot lose weight, if you are feeling dry skin, brittle nails, all the symptoms I mentioned, really, please get your thyroid checked. It can change your life. Now, let's kind of back up here and talk a little bit more bigger picture about the thyroid. So your thyroid can be underfunctioning, that's hypothyroidism, or can be overfunctioning, hyperthyroidism. We are focusing on hypo. But just so you know, if it's hyper, you're going to feel anxiety. You may have weight loss. Heart palpitations are a big one. And just, this kind of sense of being on edge. It's really, really rare to have hyperthyroidism, but definitely if you're having those symptoms, you should check it out. And here's the thing, as I mentioned, there is this perimenopause thyroid connection, because it gets better. During perimenopause, remember I told you that T4 has to convert to T3, which is the active form. Well, guess what? All the fluctuations during perimenopause also affect that conversion. So even if you don't necessarily have a thyroid problem, just going through perimenopause can really have some impact on how your thyroid functions. And this is why it's difficult to figure out what's going on, because it could literally be both. Because again, perimenopause, you can have fatigue, you can have brain fog and weight gain. Like those are like symptoms of all the women coming through trying to identify what's going on in terms of menopause. I want to hop back to Hashimoto's, because when we have an autoimmune condition, what happens is that this is going to basically lead to chronic inflammation and a decline in our thyroid function over time. And from a functional medicine perspective, we look at Hashimoto's and we're not just addressing the thyroid itself, but we're addressing the factors that are going to contribute to how and why do you have this autoimmune activity in the first place, right? So there are a lot of things that can trigger autoimmune conditions, and we want to look at the gut. We want to look at their environmental toxins that could be there. Food sensitivities is a big, big, big one. I've mentioned it before. I put everybody that is willing, that comes through, on a food elimination diet. And a food elimination diet is going to generally eliminate those foods that are really the most common triggers. When I mean triggers, I mean things that are inflammatory, things that create a reaction in your body that your body just doesn't like. And the reason why I love the food elimination diet, because, some people's like, well, I can just go get tested and see what foods I'm sensitive to. And that's fine. I'm not knocking that. But I love the food elimination diet because when you remove gluten, dairy, sugar, soy, for thyroid folks and anybody who's having any issues with pain or any suspicion of autoimmunity, we want to eliminate nightshade. So there's like tomatoes, potatoes, eggplant, peppers, things like that. I put everyone on this food elimination diet. Why? Because you are going to feel amazing, first of all, when you eliminate gluten, dairy, sugar, alcohol. I know people are like, well, what is there to eat? There's a million things to eat, right? Gluten, you don't have to have gluten every day. You don't have to have it at all. I know it's hard, but it's worth it. Let me tell you, the first time I did the food elimination diet, actually, when I went to a functional medicine doctor, I was in my mid 30s, and she put me on this diet because I was having chronic headaches and pain, just joint pain. This is before the whole Hashimoto's diagnosis. And so she's like, okay, you're going to do the food elimination diet. She explained it all and said, and you're going to take out tomatoes, potatoes, nightshade. What? At that point, I lived in Maryland. I was eating tomatoes like nobody's business. And I was offended because I was like, first of all, it's a tomato. That's a fruit or a vegetable. It has seeds. So I guess technically, whatever, you know what I'm saying. It's a tomato. How can it be wrong? How can that be bad? So I was a little like, I was giving her the side eye actually, because I was like, I don't know about these tomatoes, but I'm going to do exactly what she told me to do. 2 weeks in the food elimination diet, let me tell you something. I never had more energy. I was never happy. I would wake up in the morning like this is crazy. And I did it for like 4 weeks. That's a typical time, about 28 days. And then what you do is that you bring back each one of these foods. And this is why I love it, because you bring back each food and you get to see exactly how you feel when you eat that food. And the only way you can do this is by doing it that way. I mean, technically you could totally just eliminate that food and do it that way. But I think that's harder to me. Just get them all out the way, reintroduce them and see how you feel. So of course I'm feeling great. I'm like, oh my God, I'm never going to eat bread again. I'm never going to have sugar. This is how I'm going to live. That didn't last for long. But the first thing I brought back was my tomatoes, because I was like, listen, I know that it's not these tomatoes. So let me go ahead and eat my tomatoes. When you bring your food back, you bring it back like strong. You don't just eat a little bit, you eat the whole thing. So I love tomatoes and avocados and tomato sandwiches, spaghetti. So I was just going to town eating all things tomatoes. I ate it that day. I felt fine. I was like, see, everything is fine. I woke up the next morning. I felt like a Mack truck had hit my body. All of the gains that I had made in those 4 weeks, I had lost them all. I felt discombobulated. I had brain fog. I literally felt every joint in my body. I was incensed. I was like, no, not the tomatoes. And these are the types of things that you're going to learn when you do the food elimination diet. And then you can decide for yourself. You might have some sensitivity to something, but the sensitivity may not bug you that much. It might be like, oh, you just get a little, itchy back of your throat, or maybe a little tiny rash, or something that, just doesn't seem to be too problematic. And we're not talking about allergies. We're talking about food sensitivities. Even to this day, I'm just like, was it really the tomatoes? But it was the tomatoes. Tomatoes are nightshades. And if you are having joint pain, headaches, and fatigue, I highly suggest that you take probably all nightshades. I'm partial to the tomatoes, obviously, because that was my culprit. And I didn't even stick around to see, I might be sensitive to other nightshades. I still eat tomatoes. No, don't get me wrong. But I know what I'm dealing with when I eat a tomato. Like, I'm not going to eat it like I used to. I may have a little bit of salsa. I will have some spaghetti, but sometimes I just have to be like, okay, you know how you're going to feel. Your joints are going to hurt. This is how you're going to feel. And I get to ask myself the question, do you want to feel like crap tomorrow, or is it worth it? Is it really worth it? Because I know exactly how I'm going to feel. And this is why I love it, because you can decide, okay, yes, you want to keep eating that food and you know it makes you feel bad, then you go right ahead. But you can't deny it when you do the food elimination diet. So I highly, highly, highly recommend it. No, it's not the easiest thing to do, but it is well worth it. And you will learn so much about how your food is impacting how you feel, which really got me back to this whole Hashimoto's thing, because gluten and dairy and sugar in particular, maybe not as much sugar, but the gluten and the dairy, Hashimoto's, no bueno. They don't like it, especially gluten. So if you are having signs of, dysfunction in your thyroid, you do have Hashimoto's, it's not just about taking a pill to help get your thyroid function where you want it. It's also about adjusting your lifestyle and your diet and understanding that your gut is so important. Probiotics, prebiotics are important, and really an anti-inflammatory type of diet. So now I want to talk about, how do we replace hormones for the thyroid? So if you go to your doctor, and if you happen to be one of those people who actually do have a TSH is really high, and they're going to prescribe levothyroxine. Levothyroxine is, otherwise the brand name is a Synthroid, and you probably, if you don't yourself take it, then you have a family member who may take it. It's a very, very popular drug. But here's the problem. And here's what I've seen in patients coming through is, yes, you may have hypothyroidism. By the way, most of the patients that I have seen for hypothyroidism that already had the diagnosis, their doctor didn't even screen them for Hashimoto's. Like, they don't even think about screening you for the autoimmune portion of it. They just look at your TSH. Your TSH was 4.5. You qualify for some levothyroxine, and that's exactly what you're going to get. The problem is that if you have, especially an autoimmune condition or chronic stressors or certain gut issues, your T4, that medication they're giving you, they're going to give you a whole bunch of that. You're still not converting it to T3. So now you just have some extra T4. You may feel a little bit better because you are getting a little bit more conversion, but you're not feeling great. And what I see in these patients is that this is where the reverse T3 comes in. The reverse T3 is the inactive form. So almost always when I see somebody on levothyroxine, they have generally higher levels of their T3 is typically still on the lower end of normal, and they have high levels of reverse T3, which means they're basically just taking that T4 and it's going into an inactive form that your body cannot use. So in functional medical circles, we are going to be supplementing with both T4 and T3. Now, of course, we're going to be looking at labs and really looking at the direct hormones more so than the TSH. We're going to be looking at those and giving you the hormones that's going to support what's the lowest. For me, I didn't need any T4. My TSH was normal. My T4 was normal. My T3 was in the toilet. So they gave me liothyronine is the name of it. And the brand name of that is called Cytomel. So I was given a compounded T3, which was a slow acting T3. And I took it in the morning and I took it in the afternoon. And like I said, it was a game changer. So even if you were diagnosed with hypothyroidism and you're still not feeling great and you're still having those symptoms, you're going to want to look at your T3, and you need to find a provider who is familiar with looking at the thyroid this way. And more likely it's going to be a functional medicine type person, integrative medicine, or even a naturopath. That's where you're going to get your answers. So when we treat the thyroid, there are different ways to treat it. We can obviously give you just T4, and some people that might be necessary. But on average, we're going to give you T4 with T3 or just T3. And typically that's going to be in a product that's most commonly known as MP thyroid. They have different names, but Armour thyroid is another one. What I'm getting at is that this is a desiccated porcine derived product. That is a fancy way of saying it comes from pork, pig, thyroid. And this is where people get a little bit like, oh, I don't want to take, I don't want to, if they don't eat pork, or which is valid. But this has been around for years. It was actually around before Big Pharma came and started really pushing levothyroxine or Synthroid. And so I just want to be transparent, because if you go to research it, you're going to be like, wait, what? Comes from a pig. So it is. It's desiccated porcine derived thyroid gland. So I want you to do your own research on MP thyroid, Armour thyroid, and things of that sort. But we're going to look at really more of giving you a combination, and that's how we can do it. You can get T4 and T3 that doesn't come from an MP thyroid. It doesn't have to be at a compounding pharmacy, because technically you could take levothyroxine or Synthroid, and you could take it with Cytomel, which is the brand name of a T3. But that means you're taking two different pills, whereas it's something like an MP thyroid or a compounded type of thyroid support is going to probably put it in one pill. I don't need to get into all the weeds with that, but I just want you to be aware that there are different ways that you can take your thyroid or ingest it. And it could be that you really just need E3, liothyronine by itself. And it doesn't have to be compounded. It's an FDA approved drug that you can get at CVS, Walmart, and all the things. The problem with it is that the dosing, it only comes in 5 micrograms, and then the next dose is 25 micrograms. And most people need somewhere in between 5 and 25. So we have to take those 5s and say, okay, I need you to take 2 in the morning. And Cytomel tends to work a little more rapidly than the levothyroxine, the T4. And so we sometimes have to dose it throughout the day. And a lot of people do really well with taking it in the morning and then taking another dose around the afternoon when they start to get that afternoon lull. So I know I went over those a little quickly, but I just, at the end of the day, I want you to know that you can get what you need through a regular pharmacy. It doesn't have to be compounded, but the compounded versions oftentimes are MP thyroid, makes it a little easier for us to manage it. Now, I'm going to go really quickly into some of the supplements that you want to think about if you just want to support your thyroid, because at the end of the day, there's some, especially selenium, which is a trace mineral that's essential for converting your T4 into T3. So you may not need to, again, take a medication, but you want to do things that are going to optimize your thyroid. So selenium is really important in that conversion. It also helps reduce the inflammation in the thyroid and helps protect against oxidative stress. And ways that you can get your selenium, most commonly quoted, are Brazil nuts, sunflower seeds, and fish. But at the end of the day, you probably want to supplement with that. Zinc is also really critical. Zinc is like another one of those wonder minerals that we really need to always make sure that we are having enough of. And it's critical for both the thyroid to make the T4 in the first place, and it's critical for the conversion of the T4 to the T3. So you can get your zinc in beef, pumpkin seeds, and shellfish is another zinc-rich food. Iodine. Iodine is really the building block for the thyroid hormones itself. So when we talk about T3, it's really talking about how many iodine molecules are on the thyroid itself. Now, it's important, though, with iodine because it can also be harmful, especially in certain autoimmune conditions. We have to just be careful. We definitely will support it with iodine, but you don't necessarily want to take high doses of it unless we're really, really clear on the etiology. If you have an autoimmune condition, you just want to be careful with iodine in particular. Iodine is very rich in seaweed. So those dried seaweed little snacks, you can get another way to get it if you don't want to take the pills. But again, I think supplementation when it comes to the thyroid is really important because our foods aren't as rich in things that we really need them to be anyway. Vitamin D. Vitamin D vitamin D is everything. Like, she does everything. She's important in your immune function. And so with autoimmunity, especially with Hashimoto's, you want to quell the inflammation. Let me tell you, I once had a issue going on with my knee. It was inflamed. I was in pain and I didn't have any like Motrin or anything around. I don't remember the amount of vitamin D, but it was significant. And I can tell you, like, the inflammation went down like within hours. Vitamin D is the one vitamin that our body actually makes. Like all these other ones, vitamin A, vitamin C, we have to take those in exogenously. We make vitamin D. So if we make it, it's important. And it's important that we understand that, yes, you need sunlight in order to convert to get that vitamin D. But there are conditions that for some people just still don't allow you to convert very well. The more melanin you have in your skin, that's also going to affect the ability for you to convert. This is why people of color, not just in certain climates, have lower vitamin D levels. They did a study around this and around COVID. Basically, those that had optimal levels of vitamin D did far, far better in terms of not dying from COVID than the rest. So vitamin D is huge. It's important for your thyroid. And I usually recommend you take on average 5,000 daily. Tyrosine is another amino acid. It's a precursor for thyroid hormones. And we get that in our diet, but also, again, it's great to consider that. Magnesium is going to help manage stress. It's a factor in the thyroid promotion, the hormone promotion itself. Magnesium is essential in a lot of the other enzymatic reactions that our hormones need to make. And most of us are magnesium deficient. So that's a really important hormone. Ashwagandha. Ashwagandha is an adaptogen. It's an herb, and it can really help regulate your stress hormones and ultimately support your thyroid. This is important. Ashwagandha, say that 10 times, is again just great for adrenal support. But all of these supplements are things that you probably would be well served taking anyway. And finally, probiotics. Probiotics are going to be important for gut function, and the gut plays a role because that's one of the places where T4 is actually converted into T3. So maintaining the microbiome of the gut is super important. And I am going to take this moment shamelessly to share. I actually started a supplement line. It's called Tula MD. So Tula MD has been really in play for the last couple of months here in the practice, but I'm introducing it to the rest of the world on this podcast. Tula means balance in Sanskrit. And I created this supplement line really to support the patients in the practice and hopefully those of you out there. And what was a result of this podcast was me realizing that I really did not have a supplement that supported the thyroid. And that was like, wow, this is really important and I should do that. My mission at Tula MD was to empower women to navigate the menopause transition and beyond, really with confidence and vitality. So the supplements are formulated with integrity, using really superior raw ingredients, and they're all third-party tested and based on evidence-based research and protocols, and really wanting to design a program that would be simple and accessible for you to support your menopause journey, your weight loss, your adrenals, your thyroid. Really, it's providing women with science-backed tools to thrive in midlife and beyond. I know there's a lot of confusion out there in the world around supplements and which one to take and why should I take this one and is this the right dosing? So what I really tried to do with this line is to create it so it's very simple. If we're looking at anything from thyroid support now to adrenal support, to weight management, and obviously to hormone balance, Tula MD is my new passion project. I hope you'll check it out at tulawellnessmd.com, and you'll just go to the shop section. You can also add the code Stay Juicy and you will get a discount on your first order. But these are the things that even if you are medicating, these are the types of vitamins, minerals, adaptogens that at the end of the day, you should be taking anyway, I think, to support you if you are going through this transition or even if you're beyond it, because it's going to help you. So you got to recognize that there's going to be overlapping symptoms of hypothyroidism and perimenopause. You want to do some comprehensive testing. I told you TSH isn't enough. You need to look for a free T3, a free T4, and thyroid antibodies. You can also add in that reverse T3, but understand that TSH is not enough. And if your doctor told you your thyroid's fine, that's because they looked at your TSH and that's all they went for. The other thing you really want to think about is your family history. If you have somebody in your family who's taken Synthroid or levothyroxine or has hypothyroidism, you want to look and understand that there's a lot of genetics that are involved in this, and even any other autoimmune conditions. So for example, I was diagnosed with Sjogren's and lupus early on, lupus in my late 20s, Sjogren's next. And guess what? Autoimmune conditions, they like to run in packs. They're like little cliques. And so if you have one, it's very possible that you may have some other ones. So fun. So it's all very manageable. And all that means is that you have antibodies to your thyroid. It doesn't mean that you have, again, a thyroid that's not functioning well. But if you have antibodies, we got to look at what's causing that. If it's stress, if it's your gut, if it's all the things that I mentioned, then that's where you want to start making some changes. And remember, we can still look at perimenopause. We talked about the TSH. The TSH was high because your thyroid hormones were low. So your brain is like, hey, we need more. So it makes more. Well, it does the same for the ovaries. When your estrogen is low, then the anterior pituitary, same place, says, hey, where's the estrogen? We need more. It makes follicle stimulating hormone. Now, follicle stimulating hormone really can tell us a lot about where a woman is in perimenopause for the most part. Because if a woman has a FSH over 40 or 50, then it's a wrap. I'm like, girl, we're done here. It's not coming back and we're there. So sometimes you can use that as a way to really kind of signal that you really are menopausal, because sometimes for some of us, you've had hysterectomy, so you don't have the cyclic bleeding to give you any type of indication. You're just like feeling some kind of way, but you can't tell what's happening. So a lot of patients will ask me, how do I know when I'm menopausal? And it's like, well, we're never going to really know. Actually, it's really only one day because it's a year past your last menstrual period. So that's really not going to be possible, but we are able to look at it. And if it's very elevated, we'd be like, yeah, we're there. The thing about it is during perimenopause, it is going to fluctuate, but it generally is going to fluctuate on its way up. And so we also want to look at it sequentially. You just don't want to take one number. But if you do take one number and it's 50, it's not coming back down to 10. But if it's in, 3, 10, 12, even 20, then it's still probably fluctuating in a way we don't really know where you are. But once it gets to a certain point, we know it's a wrap. It ain't happening. The estrogen is gone. The eggs have left the building. So I hope this was helpful. I know that there is someone listening here that has been impacted by the thyroid, and I really hope that you find the help that you need. It will literally change your life, and you owe that to yourself. It's unfortunate that as providers, we aren't always taught all the things that we need that can be the most helpful to help patients. And, the only reason that this is like a passion project for me is because it was me. It happened to me. Otherwise, I was treating people the same way. Like, girl, you're fine. Your TSH is 4. Go home. Now I'm like, oh my gosh, like my eyes had been open, and they were open because of my own personal experience. So it's not your provider's fault per se. We just weren't trained in a lot of ways to understand how our bodies are actually functioning and looking at the root cause. And, if you don't necessarily have an interest in it or a personal experience around it, then it's another one of those things. So if your provider isn't really giving you what you need, find another provider and look for people that are going to look more in depth at why and what's going on. So those are functional medicine providers, integrative medicine providers, naturopaths. January is Thyroid Awareness Month. And this is why we're talking about the thyroid. But I was so excited when I saw that on the calendar, because between, hypothyroidism and perimenopause, like those are the two things that just really have just changed my whole perspective on how I practice medicine. So I hope again that this was helpful for you, and that you do the work you need to do to get to those burning questions. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I so tired? Why can't I lose weight? Why do I have this brain fog? You're not alone. There is help out there, but it is going to require you probably to do a little bit more work than you might have been prepared to do. But I promise you, the work is well worth it. I hope you share this episode with someone that you love, because honestly, I am confident that it's going to change somebody's life once they understand that it's probably their thyroid there really is something going on. Thank you all. As usual, stay brilliant, stay beautiful, but most of all, stay juicy, and I will see you on the next one.